As Director of Programming for Spanish and Portuguese content here at Blumet, I would like to begin by expressing my gratitude for the work of Charco Press, and specifically of Director and Publishing Editor Carolina Orloff, who I also consider a beloved friend, without which my own work as a literary curator would be impossible. Charco's mission, and I quote, focuses on finding outstanding contemporary Latin American literature and bringing it to new readers in the English-speaking world. Charco acts as a cultural and linguistic bridge for readers in English to be able to access a brand new world of fiction that has, until now, been missing from their reading list. Carolina, it's an absolute honor, pleasure, privilege, total delight and treat to have you here with us today. So, let's start from the beginning. Let's go back to your origins. First question, why did you create this publishing house?
Oh, thank you, Ingrid. No, the honor is mine. I'm so pleased to be talking to you and to everyone out there in Canada. It's an honor, and I don't want to spend too long, but in a way, the origins of Charco might have to do with Canada, because just before finishing high school in Argentina, I got a scholarship to finish my education in Canada, in Vancouver Island. So I spent 2 years in a UWC, which might mean something to someone out there in Vancouver Island. And from then on, I started living, in 2 languages, in 2 cultures. And I started discovering that there was also a Latin American self to my Argentinian self. I'm originally from Buenos Aires, and being extricated from my Buenos Aires background and mingling with international people made me realize that there was a whole continent there, in the sense that we're far down there in the south of the continent, and that in a way reconciled me with a different kind of identity. And from then on, I've always lived in the English-speaking world, paradoxically. So from Canada, I moved to the UK to do my studies, and which were always involved with literature and philosophy and linguistics and translation. And so when I finished my long career in academia, I realized that I wanted to be something more active in the world of literature, not just teaching it, but actually maybe producing something that could get into the minds of readers, that wasn't just academic papers. So the idea of Charco comes from a little bit from that background story of living in 2 languages and 2 cultures, and also experiencing to my mind was a very limited offer to the readership in English in terms of contemporary Latin American literature. So that kind of sums up the idea behind why Charco and why in the English-speaking world.
Thank you, Carolina. Wow, what a lovely, it's an incredible story to hear from the origins up until now, So I'll ask you a little bit, again, myself also, because you're talking about the vecindario, or the neighborhood, of Latin America, and, myself being from Brazil and Argentina, having lived in Colombia and Mexico, and, these are entirely different worlds, but they have at the same time, there is a thread, there is a connection that's not yet known, And so not yet known, meaning that readers still refer to Carlos Fuentes and Garcia Marquez and to the boom of the 60s. And so what is Charco's editorial line in that sense, in terms of bringing these new voices? Like, how did that, idea, or how do you work with that editorial line?
Well, exactly. It's great to talk to you, Ingrid, because you know the background story as well for yourself. So in that sense, coming from Latin America and living in the English-speaking world and within the literary world, I always felt very frustrated that the authors that made it across, amazing authors and in their own right, made it through to English, but they were always the same in my experience. I'm talking about maybe 10, 15 years ago, and always by the same translator. So I felt there was a kind of monopoly, if you want, that in my gut, every time I went back to Latin America and saw the difference in the vibrancy and the variety and in the diversity of exploration of genres, of styles and of voices that were happening there. And then I would come back here and go to the bookshop or teach in the university and feel, oh, we're still stuck in the 60s or in the 70s. So I felt there was a real need to shift or shuffle that kind of very ingrained small canon that seems to have been kind of installed in the English-speaking world, which I think is changing. It's slowly but surely changing in the last, I'd say, 5 years or so. Not just because of Charco, although Charco is helping, but because there's a curiosity there in the readership that is finally awakening and daring to discover these new voices, these new universes. So I completely digressed from the...
No, the digression is very necessary. And in fact, for me, I mean, our connection together, I should, tell the readers, Carolina and I work together on many, many projects. And as I mentioned in the very beginning of this intro, I could not do my job if it wasn't for Carolina, because we cannot bring writers to Canada if they're not translated to English and French. It's a huge, because then our public can't read them. And although we're multilingual, we can keep, our we can please our Spanish audience, but our Spanish audience is a very limited one. The idea is to promote the writers in English. So it's, it's so key that you do this, Carolina. And again, one of the things that I want to mention is that, as you know, I mean, the programmers mention your work. I mean, because again, without which we cannot do it. And at the time, as we speak, an hour ago was just announced that the Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz Prize in Guadalajara, which is one of the biggest prizes in the Spanish language, well, for women writing for sure, was just won by Fernanda Trias, that Carolina has just published in English. So now I can post on Facebook and recommend, read Fernanda in English, thanks to Carolina, which is a wonderful thing. And you were mentioning, let's talk a little bit about the translators, because you're mentioning also, as for Blumet's, translation is also a very, very key thing. And the work of translation is literally to rewrite the work on the voice of another. I mean, because you're not just translating words, you're bridging an entire culture, you're introducing. Tell us a little bit, Carolina, because one of the things that's fantastic about your publishing house is your team of translators, is just absolutely spectacular. How did you first start working with them? How did you amass these names? Tell us a little bit about your relationship with the translators.
Thank you, Ingrid. Wonderful questions. Well, I should add to the previous question as well, is that it was a very difficult decision when we started thinking about launching Charco, referring to my previous answers as well, as to where to start, right? You go back to the 60s and 70s when the literary boom happened and try and fill in the gaps of those that didn't make it to that canon, or do you start from the 90s, or do you start from today and work yourself kind of backwards and forward, in a higgledy-piggledy kind of way? So we decided to start from the now, and we picked, we do try and select as much as possible contemporary authors that are having an impact in different kind of ways today in Latin America and beyond. So when you look through our catalog, you'll see very contemporary authors that in my mind as an editorial director, I try to not only pick good stories and good, maybe not good, but interesting, dynamic universes that have a potential to grow, but also I'm interested in authors that are alive, in the sense that are alive in their society, that have opinions, that care, that get involved in controversial debates. And I find that interesting when it comes to transferring that to another culture. So it's not just about a bestseller for me. And in that, when you think about all that together, coming to choose a translator for a book or an author, to me it's I take a lot of time thinking about that. It's not just like, oh, you translate, you can do anyone. It's a curation in itself. So I carefully think of a person that obviously is not only just brilliant, but also has a certain sensitivity to maybe a culture or a theme or a particular author. So it's a very careful process that I go through. I say I, not just because I'm selfish, but because that's me thinking about it, and I care a lot about that pairing. To me, it's a very careful, almost like a Cupid kind of putting together of these people really have to understand each other, because, like you said, it's a rewriting, and in that rewriting, a lot of the times in our catalog, we're bringing authors for the first time to the English-speaking world, which in turn opens up doors to other languages. English is still very much a gateway to other cultures, to Arabic, to some Eastern European languages. So what happens to that book with the English speaking readership is very important to me. I feel very responsible. So that pairing has to be, as perfect or as harmonious as possible. So yeah, there's a very careful thought process behind the choosing of the translators, and we try to work
question.
with. Oh, sorry.
No, sorry. I'm just dying to ask so many questions, but go ahead.
Sorry.
No, I mean the pairing, especially. No. Please don't apologize. The opposite. I'm the one who apologizes for interrupting, because I'm just, for me, I mean, I have to mention this at one point because we're talking about the definition of Latin America, and here in Canada we tend to use Latin America and Hispanic kind of like our neighbors downstairs interchangeable down there. The Americans. Interchangeably, which is extremely frustrating for Brazilians. We're still very, the work here is still very poorly done in that sense, whereas, I keep telling people that in Latin America, or to shine in any Latin American organization, be it cultural or enterprise, a publishing house, you have to include Brazil. You cannot just disconnect that, right? So tell us a little bit about Brazil, your Brazilian presence in Charco, your relationship with the Portuguese language, or with the, and how, you go, Charco obviously includes great authors from Brazil. Tell us a little bit about Brazil.
Well, I feel very indebted to Brazil because it has a presence, but it's very well. We have a very small catalog to start with, so we only publish 6 to 7 books a year, which I'd like to expand as much as possible, but we're only getting there because we're a small team. And Brazil within that has a presence. So we've published Julian Fuchs, his first book and his second book, because they're part of a trilogy. And soon enough, we'll be publishing Ana Paula Maia, so a female Brazilian author. And I have a couple of other gems, which I can't tell you about yet, but I will later on. And so very slowly, I feel that we're catching up with the very vibrant literary scene in Brazil, which I feel is completely unique as well because of the realities and the combination of factors that interexist or cohabit in Brazil are so specific and so particular to Brazil that I feel picking the literature that will be represented in English from that country has to be also very specifically curated. So my ambition is to every year have at least one Brazilian author.
We thank you very much, on behalf of Brazilians, for including us, or for not, forcing us to be articulating in a language that isn't ours, and it's particularly being here in Canada, this is very brutal because, again, October just ended, and October is known as Hispanic Heritage Month here. But, it's, as I mentioned, it's used interchangeably with Latin America, and it's obviously a huge problem. But to finish off our last question, again, because it's an express interview, and obviously Caroline and I could talk for hours nonstop. This is just a quick intro. Carolina, tell us a little bit about your work in the dissemination, or like the work post-production. Once you have the book out there, some of your books, some of your authors end up, their translations end up being a finalist for the Man Booker. I mean, being bestsellers in New Zealand. You take them around the world, and to English speakers, to the English speaker or readership rather. So tell us a little bit about the perks of being an author, of translated by Charco.
Well, I'm completely invested in as I was saying to you before, in trying to bring across the whole universe of an author. It's not just, for me, it's not just about a book, it's the whole aesthetic project that an author might have. So in that sense, as much as possible, because the readers out there might know that it's not easy. I think in general, and generally speaking, the English-speaking reader has, that's why I was talking before about curiosity, because I think there's a certain shyness, if you want, when it comes to reading Latin American literature. I think it has to do with the lack of references, maybe, in the English-speaking world, we don't have a lot of references to Latin America and what happens out there, and who's writing out there, and what about. So to me, it's like a life mission. When a book comes out, it's not just about the book, it's about before and after, getting interviews with the author, publishing excerpts, publishing other pieces that this author might have written, short stories, non-fiction pieces. So it's a continuous kind of pumping into the system of, well, look what's happening out there, what these people are writing about, and it's fascinating and it's varied, and it has a lot in common with the things that we're all as humans preoccupied with. So it's a constant process for me to try and give visibility to Latin American authors in general.
Carolina, thank you so. I mean, your authors are, super privileged to have you. We're very privileged to have you. We're super grateful for your work, the wonderful work that you do to bring us to bring us these voices in English, or in their English selves, So thank you so much again. Always a pleasure, an honor to speak to you. And I send you a huge hug. And
me too.
Thank you.
Thank you.